You set the gold standard for your business. Your website should do the same. Wix puts you at the helm so you can enjoy the creative freedom of designing your site just the way you want. Want someone to bounce your ideas off? Talk with AI to create a beautiful site together. Whatever your business, manage it from one place and tie it all together with a personalized domain name. Gear up for success with a brand that says you best. You can do it yourself on Wix.
This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. Thrilled today to visit with Holly Buckley. Holly chairs the McGuireWoods Healthcare Private Equity Conference, does an incredible job of it. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about some of the lessons learned and the thoughts she had coming out of last week's McGuireWoods Healthcare Private Equity Conference. Holly, let me tee it up and ask you for a few observations of what you saw and what you're seeing and thinking.
Yeah, happy to do so. And it was a really fun, energizing few days. There's a lot of content there and still processing some of it. I had the privilege of interviewing Lance Armstrong, which was really fun. And he was a very interesting guy and had the entire room very much captivated. But in terms of the actual substance around healthcare private equity and investing and lending, few core thoughts. I'd say, in terms of the overall market outlook, I would frame it as cautious optimism amid regulatory and economic headwinds. And so I would say the investors that we had speaking and just in informal discussions with folks, we talked about optimism of increased deal flow coming up, but in certain sectors, not across the board. So sectors such as health tech, IT infrastructure, pharma services, and even Medicaid-heavy areas, there was a fair amount of optimism, notwithstanding a fair amount of what's going on the national landscape from a macroeconomic perspective, as well as a policy perspective, and then from a state law perspective. There's really been a strategic shift from traditional provider services to more diversified investments. And there's a real focus on things like patient outcomes, access to care. I mean, these have always been important themes, but the investment VCs are very much focused on tapping into those themes from an IT perspective, AI perspective, and how do we really solve problems in light of the fact that generalized growth is somewhat harder to come by. I think from a lending perspective, similar to the investment side, there's anticipated to be an uptick in deal volume the second half of the year. The first half of the year has been slower, but really competitive pricing and aggressive terms are becoming more prevalent, especially in the middle market. And the availability of capital is high, which intensifies competition for quality deals. So let me pause there for a second and we can talk about maybe some of the more specific investment trends.
No, I think that would be great. Let me ask you this. In terms of what everybody's sort of wondering is about deal flow, what it looks like. Are the markets going to open up, or is the sort of cost of debt still too much of a challenge? Or just too much uncertainty? What are you seeing in terms of the floodgates of deals opening? Any impressions?
I don't know that it's going to be floodgates as much as somewhat of an opening. I think there's still a lot of trepidation, but as we continually talked about, there's so much dry powder and a lot of funds are out there fundraising. So there's going to be even more. So deals are happening and there will be more deals happening, but we're seeing deals happening in different spaces. So a lot of deals in kind of IT companies and companies looking to support the provider services businesses, but less in the actual provider services businesses. But then we're seeing more activity in certain subsegments. So we're still seeing a fair amount of interest in behavioral health, but it's not going to be just kind of a not as much in just kind of generic provider services, but maybe more in telemed or tech-enabled platforms that are still delivering care, but maybe have another angle. We're weirdly seeing, I don't know if it's weirdly or not, but continued activity in a resurgence of activity in DSOs, dental support organizations, which is just, that was kind of one of the first big waves kind of 10, 15 years ago. And it just kind of continues due to the massive market and the continued fragmentation. And then we're also seeing investments in wellness services, but we're seeing, for example, wellness, med spa, longevity medicine, and kind of businesses like that starting to grow more. And then we're also seeing a lot in life sciences and pharma services. So I don't know it's going to be floodgates, but I think we will see growth in healthcare private equity deals through the end of the year, but not a massive amount, but some increase from where we're at right now.
And dental is a fascinating area because it comes with lots of different funding sources: Medicaid, direct, some health plans, some other places, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody seems to need dental work, and there's 200,000 dentists in the country. So it seems like there's a big enough business. There's still opportunities, even in changing times, and certainly that's been up and down. What is just a couple years ago? Behavioral health was really hot. Veterinary health was really hot. What other things are you hearing about that people are talking about a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think behavioral health still. I think one of the really interesting things that was a surprise to me was an interest in Medicaid-heavy businesses, which I thought were going to be somewhat DOA in light of the proposed Medicaid cuts that are going through the federal budget process right now. But there was a fair amount of, I'd say, excitement around the possibilities of investing in Medicaid-focused businesses that were involved in doing those better. And so I think a lot of folks saw opportunity with that. So, for example, if the work requirements become a much bigger factor, there's potentially opportunities for funds looking to invest in how to better facilitate the work requirements. And I think just Medicaid being so big and so important, but with the federal government so focused on it, I think we are going to see a fair amount of focus there. I think the other big provider area that we continue to see really big interest in is infusion. I think with the growing significance of specialty medicine and individualized medicine, and the push to get healthcare out of more expensive venues and into the home and more affordable outpatient venues, infusion remains really high on the interest list for a lot of funds.
Thank you. And in other areas that you think are really sort of top notch right now and so forth?
Yeah, I'd say life sciences and pharma services deals are still of really big interest. So clinical trials, contract manufacturing, and things like that. But also looking at automation in the pharma services space and the use of AI in pharma services was something we heard a fair amount of discussion around. So AI's role in clinical trial design, drug discovery, decentralized trial management, as well as just kind of automation around the entire pharma services spectrum. So around things like the compliance function. So I think we'll continue to see a lot of interest there. And then a lot on the digital health side, like how can we automate different parts of the healthcare cycle, as well as kind of the integration with payers. So again, just less on the direct provider services, provision of care side, and more on the support services around the delivery of care.
Thank you very, very much. And talk about when you come out of the conference, Holly, you see so much activity, and there's been years where the country's been in a recession, so the conference is very depressing, and everybody seems to be there, like you have to be there, seem to be looking for jobs. There's other times where deal activity is so insane that it's that it just is just a nonstop activity. This year, I'd say the temperature was very, very healthy. Notwithstanding the fact that the private equity business has been a little bit slower because people have been concerned about the cost of debt. There's been this long hold periods for a lot of things and so forth. Talk a little bit about what are you focused on and excited about coming out of this conference, which was very inspiring and very positive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Scott, timing is everything. I'd love to take credit for a great timed conference, but I think had the conference been 2 months earlier when all the tariff discussions started, I think the mood would have been very different. And I think with a somewhat of a pullback on the tariff discussion and the stock market somewhat rebounding to almost normal levels, I think there was a lot more optimism and a much better vibe than there would have been if the conference had been 2 months earlier. So we were lucky with the timing there in terms of just the energy and the vibe. But I think what I'm really focused on was that we had a lot of just great conversations with folks about what they're looking at and kind of ways that we can help and connect people. And so we're really focused on that. And then hopefully just getting into a good deal cycle for the next 3, 6, 12 month time period. So really just looking to figure out how we can add value for our clients and our friends in the market as they're continuing to look for good investments and execute on.
Thank you very, very much. Holly, anything else you'd like to share with us today coming out of the conference last week?
I just want to thank anyone that was listening today that was there. Thank you. I had 1 or 2 folks come up to me and say that they enjoy listening to your podcast, Scott, and that they have listened to some of our discussions. And so I'm happy that those people are out there. It's always fun to hear. And I think there's a few events coming up we'd love to make folks aware of. We're going to be in New York, June 11th and 12th for a New York and then Connecticut healthcare private equity pop-up meetings in each of those spots on those dates. If anyone's interested in those, feel free to reach out. And then we will have our healthcare growth and operations conference in Charlotte, September 16th and 17th. Feel free to reach out for that too. But just appreciative of all of the work that went into it and what a great time we had last week.
Holly, thank you very much. I loved getting a chance to visit with you and talk healthcare private equity trends and just general business and leadership with you on the Becker Private Equity Podcast. You are as good as it gets. I know we have another colleague who thinks that he is so brilliant and the very best, but you are the very best, and don't let him hear that. Holly, thank you as always for joining us on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. You are the smartest and the most articulate, and your other colleague is absolutely fine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.